I'm Chang, and this is the best of Bloomberg Technology, where we bring you all our top interviews from the week in tech. Coming up, the end of net neutrality. The U.S. Federal Communications Commission votes to kill Obama-era rules for equal access to the internet. Plus, a massive merger that could shake the media landscape for decades to come. Disney is buying Fox assets for more than $52 billion. We'll hear from Disney CEO Bob Iger. And the Winklevoss twins join the ranks of the world's billionaires, all thanks to what else but Bitcoin. They explain why they took a chance on cryptocurrency. But first, to our lead. Net neutrality no more. The FCC voted to repeal the Obama-era internet protections designed to keep broadband providers from favoring content. The Republican-led commission voted 3-2 to remove the protections known as net neutrality. The vote comes amid intense protests, both online and in person, by defenders of the rules, who say that this will create an internet of haves and have-nots when it comes to accessing their content. But FCC Chair Ajit Pai heralded the return to what he called a free speech market approach, saying, "It's time for us to restore internet freedom. We are restoring the light touch framework that has governed the internet for most of its existence." Joining me now, one of the people who earlier voted to repeal net neutrality, FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr, who was nominated to the commission by President Trump. Commissioner Carr, thank you so much for joining us. You say today is a great day. Many people say today is an awful day. What don't they understand?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question and for having me on. It really is a great day for consumers, for innovation, and for freedom. There's a lot of apocryphal rhetoric out there. Here's the reality. We're voting to go back to the 2015 regulatory framework, the Title I framework, that the Commission had in place, again, in 2015 and for the 20 years before that. This is not moving towards some Mad Max version of the Internet where ISPs are going to have complete free reign to dictate your online experience. The 2015 framework had strong legal protections for consumers. Consumers are going to continue to benefit from that without the harms we're seeing from Title II.
That said, a number of organizations say they intend to sue the FCC, an activist group called Free Press saying they'll sue on the basis of broken process, deeply flawed legal reasoning, willful rejection of evidence, and absolute disregard for public input. The Attorney Generals of Washington and New York also saying they intend to sue. Attorney General Eric Schneiderman saying this is not just an attack on the future of our internet, it is an attack on all New Yorkers and on the integrity of every American's voice in government. And we will fight back. What's your reaction to those kinds of comments?
Yeah, anytime the FCC takes an action in the space of internet regulation, companies big and small, either way, sue over the decisions we make. But here's the reality. The Supreme Court in 2005 took up the FCC's authority to classify broadband internet access service as a Title I information service, and it found that the FCC did have the authority. And that's the only classification the Supreme Court has ever blessed. So the FCC's decision here, both as a procedural matter and as a substantive legal matter, is on extremely sound legal footing. So I'm confident in where we go from here.
We also spoke with former FCC Chair Tom Wheeler, who oversaw net neutrality protections. Take a listen to what he told us.
For the first time since 1934, with this decision, the FCC is washing its hands, walking away from that congressionally mandated responsibility. And they're only doing it for the, most important network that will define the rest of the 21st century. It's an inconceivable kind of action.
What do you make of this accusation that the FCC is absolving itself of responsibility rather than taking responsibility?
That's simply not the case. Again, we're going back to the same regulatory framework that was in place in 2015. I think your listeners and viewers can remember the Internet of 2015. It was not a free-for-all. There were protections. Those protections are going to be back in place. Again, the Federal Trade Commission is going to be fully empowered for the first time in 2 years to police ISPs' conduct with respect to consumers. The FCC's 2015 decision stripped the Federal Trade Commission of 100% of its authority to protect consumers against ISPs. Another key piece of that is online privacy protections, which consumers care deeply about. The FTC is the nation's premier consumer protection agency. Again, they've been prohibited during the last 2 years from taking action because of the FCC's Title II decision. So consumers are gaining protections as a result of this decision. Again, this is not going to be a situation where there are no rules in place.
Now, Comcast has said they won't invoke paid prioritization, but let's say they do. What would happen in that case?
Well, I think part of what happens here is there's a misperception about what Title II did. Right now, Title II is not stopping providers from blocking websites, creating fast and slow lanes, the paid prioritization you talked about. There are reasons why that stuff is not taking place today. It's market forces that are regulating that conduct. And after our decision, those forces stay in place. And I know there's a lot of people that don't believe in market forces, and that's fine. There's actual positive law we're putting in place, too. There's federal antitrust law, which prevents ISPs from entering agreements that unfairly, anti-competitively block, throttle, or would create anti-competitive paid prioritization. So there's going to be rules and legal standards out there that are going to be able to police any of this conduct that people are talking about.
What about the fake comments in the public comment section? Doesn't that give you any pause that 1 million comments were written potentially by a robot, to counter the vast majority of comments that were against this repeal?
No, it doesn't give me pause. Here's why. We have run an open and transparent process. The Administrative Procedure Act is very clear about how, as an agency like us, we run our rulemakings and run our record. We have an open record. Anybody that wants to file a comment can file a comment. We don't require identification on the front end because that would discourage the robust participation in our docket. We got over 24 million filings in our proceeding. I think that shows the passion that people have in this issue, and our decision is based on the substantial record evidence that we developed.
Right, but the vast majority of those comments were against this repeal.
There was a wide range of views that were expressed. And again, the question that we have to confront is a threshold legal matter for the FCC. Did Congress, when they set up Title I of the Communications Act and Title II of the Communications Act, did they intend the Internet to be in one or the other? And when you look at that legal determination that we have to make as commissioners at the agency, it's clear to me that this is a Title I information service.
So when will we see lawmakers actually enact this into law?
So our decision today goes into effect as soon as the OMB, another government agency, reviews the transparency rule that we adopted, and then it will take effect shortly after that. And so that's the timeline that we're looking at.
And how do you see the Internet, let's say the Internet 5 years from now, being different? Already it seems like so much power is consolidated in the hands of a few very powerful companies. Many of those companies were against this repeal. But how does the Internet look different to you, let's say, in 5 years?
It's a good question. Again, that's why this is such a great decision. Title II is a monopoly-style regulation, a heavy-handed regime. A lot of the debate has been about AT&T, Verizon, Comcast, or the big ISPs. I think they've been negatively impacted. I think that's what our record shows. But they also have an army of regulatory lawyers that can wade through the Title II requirements. When I talk to consumers, what they want is more competition, and that's where Title II heads us in the wrong direction. There's thousands of smaller ISPs out there that are either trying to provide service to consumers for the first time or provide competition to some of those larger providers. Those are the ones that have been hurt worst by this decision. So when I look forward, when we repeal this Title II rule, those providers are going to have an easier time competing, getting money, and consumers are going to benefit as a result of that increased competition from repealing Title II.
That was FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr. Tesla is getting its biggest known truck order yet from Pepsi. The pre-order is for 100 vehicles worth an estimated $2 million. Walmart and Anheuser-Busch have also placed orders with the automaker. Production is scheduled to start in 2019. An analyst at Consumer Edge is forecasting the Tesla truck could generate as much as $3.5 billion in annual revenue for the company. Coming up, Disney is about to become an even bigger force in Hollywood after reaching a deal to take over Fox assets. What does it mean for the future of movie making? And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. This week marked 37 years since Apple became a public company. Founder Steve Jobs was 25 at the time and held the chairman title. The company sold 4.6 million shares at $22 apiece. And since that first day of trading in 1980, shares of Apple are up more than 49,000%, with a market cap of more than $800 billion. Well, a mega media deal has been announced after weeks of speculation. Disney is snapping up a large chunk of 21st Century Fox assets in a deal valued at more than $54 billion, the biggest acquisition at Disney to date. Bloomberg TV caught up with Disney CEO Bob Iger in LA, and he explained how the deal came about.
A year ago, I didn't see this one coming either, nor did I see it coming 6 months ago. Rupert and I have known each other for a long time. We have a lot of respect for one another, and occasionally get together to muse about the business. And in a get-together this summer, where we were talking about all the disruptive forces that we were seeing and the relative position of our companies, I left thinking that there might be an opportunity for us to do something with him. And I thought about it for a few weeks, called him thereafter, and suggested maybe we should get together and talk about it, and we did. Spent some time actually analyzing whether there was something to be done and what the value proposition might be for shareholders of both companies, and ultimately rolled our sleeves up, got into a negotiation, and here we are today. And I think what we're doing is creating not only a great company, but a great global opportunity for consumers to not only consume great content made by both entities, but to consume it under circumstances that are innovative and compelling and much more user-friendly, and that's what the consumer of today demands.
Bob, we learned a little bit more about your future now, stepping down in 2021 versus 2019 previously. What's the future for James Murdoch?
James and I have talked a lot about a potential role for him. He will be integral to helping us plan the integration process, and he and I will continue to talk about whether there's a role for him at this company. We've had a good relationship, and he's been extremely helpful in this process, and I look forward to talking to him more about it.
Bob, a lot of people are thinking about the succession plan at the Walt Disney Company now and thinking that maybe James Murdoch could be part of that. Is that something you could see happening?
Well, I'm now extended through 2021, and the board of the company will have ample time to consider its options in terms of my succession and to re-engage in a planning process for that. And it's premature to really speculate. Ultimately, it will be a board decision.
Here to discuss everything we need to know about the deal, we are joined by Bloomberg's Chris Palmieri in LA. So first, Chris, walk us through, Iger said he didn't see this deal happening, though there was speculation about it for some time. Walk us through the nuts and bolts of the deal and what it means.
Well, basically, the bulk of what we know is of Fox, most of its entertainment assets are going to Disney. The Fox Studio, the FX cable channel, the National Geographic channel, a lot of international assets, the company's stake in Sky, a big satellite TV provider in Europe, Star of India, a TV provider there. So it's a massive chunk of Fox now merging with Disney.
So what do you think of this idea that James Murdoch could be Iger's successor, even if it's years from now?
There was a lot about this, going into the announcement that he would be named in some sort of senior role at Disney, and kind of a surprise today was that nothing happened. Now, neither side ruled it out. And Bob Iger, he said he expects him to have an advisory role in integrating the two companies, but nothing clear yet. So, and Bob's saying now he's going to stick around for 4 more years. So, it's hard to say at this point that James Murdoch has any real clear path to the CEO of Disney.
This is Disney's biggest acquisition ever. How does this fit into the context of their prior M&A?
Well, previously it was really about content. If they made smaller technology deals, but it was basically about bringing all these wonderful characters, whether it was Pixar or Marvel or Lucasfilm, Star Wars, into the film division. And here it's a much broader play, and it's really a doubling down on the film and TV business at this very pivotal moment where things are changing so rapidly. So we're going to see a lot of exciting things out of Disney from a technology standpoint. Bob Iger sketched out a sort of a multi-pronged strategy. He's going to have an online version of ESPN launching next year. He's going to have a Disney-branded channel channel in 2019 that's going to have all this Marvel and Star Wars content, and Hulu, which they're not going to have control of, 60% stake, is going to be kind of the adult version of what they're trying to do, and that's where Fox really comes into play with some of its programming. And so, they're trying to create an online choice for everybody.
That was Bloomberg's entertainment reporter, Chris Palmieri. Coming up, T-Mobile's big plans for the small screen. We'll hear from the U.S. telecom giant as it prepares to take on TV. Plus, Apple's roughly $400 million bet on facial recognition technology. We'll break down the investment in Finisar. This is Bloomberg. T-Mobile US has announced plans for a disruptive new TV service set to launch in 2018 and signed a pact to acquire Layer 3 TV to help build out the strategy. We caught up with Mike Sievert, T-Mobile Chief Operating Officer in Denver, and discussed the strategy behind the deal.
This is a market that is just filled with pain points, Emily. I mean, if you think about it, it's the most hated industry in America. 8 of the top 10 companies with the worst customer service ratings in America are pay TV companies. And so with our brand as the Un-carrier and our history of solving customer pain points in wireless, we're poised in an incredible way to make a big difference in this $100 billion pay TV market.
AT&T and Verizon have been exploring the online video market as well, a step beyond the slowing wireless business. How is this any different than what they're doing?
Well, what you see from AT&T is more of the same. You see, their way of getting into this was to buy DirecTV, a traditional satellite TV company, and then create bundles that people don't want. I mean, in order to get a decent deal on AT&T wireless service, you have to drill a satellite dish into the side of your house and be fed linear, one-way, uncontrolled TV services from outer space. I mean, it's no wonder people are leaving this industry in droves. There's negative growth of 2 to 2.5% in this industry, but that doesn't tell the whole story. Millennials and Gen Z customers are leaving at rates of 25 and 30% a year. They're abandoning old-fashioned linear TV like satellite TV. So AT&T's strategy is entirely wrong. And what we're essentially offering to do is bring together the best of mobile video and home TV and create something that's totally disruptive in a market that needs disruption really badly.
John Ledger, your CEO, is saying he expects the deal to close in a matter of weeks. What are your regulatory concerns given the DOJ's opposition to AT&T Time Warner?
We don't expect any. We'll close it right after the new year, right after Hart-Scott-Rodino, which we don't expect to be a barrier. So this is really exciting for us. I'm coming to you from Denver, where we just met with the team at Layer 3 TV, who are going to be one of the key ingredients of this new T-Mobile strategy. What incredible technology and what an incredible team, because we're going to build a service that people have never seen before. Think about the services that we're forced to live with today with today's linear TV. I mean, you get this program guide and a little D-pad remote control and bloop, bloop, bloop your way through to try to find things. That pales in comparison to the level of engagement of social media fed mobile video that our customers have come to love. So we're going to bring together these worlds and make TV not an island of its own anymore and really change things up.
Now, the possibility of a Sprint T-Mobile tie-up has been simmering for years. It still hasn't happened yet. What is the status of that, and what are the chances of it happening still in this regulatory environment?
Well, as you know, we looked long and hard at it, and it's a shame it didn't come through because there were some great benefits to a merger like that. But I'll tell you one thing. We were looking at Layer 3 TV and the launch of T-Mobile into the TV experience with or without that deal. It made sense if we did that deal, and it makes sense by itself. And, there's a reason. It's just this marketplace is a market that's moving way too slowly, and it's not serving customers' needs. And it's a $100 billion market that we're in an incredible position to disrupt as standalone T-Mobile.
So you're saying a Sprint T-Mobile merger is completely off the table, will never happen?
Well, look, I'm not saying that. I'm saying we looked really hard at it and it didn't happen. And so what we're doing now as a team is we're doing what you would expect us to do. We're focusing on running this great company. And boy, it is a great company in a great space. We're the only ones with service revenue growth. We've just finished 18 quarters of acquiring more than 1 million subscribers a quarter. And the main thing people need to know is, as you look at T-Mobile as a standalone company, all these worlds are converging. We like to say that all content and communications are landing on the internet, and the internet is transitioning to mobile. Well, here we are as a leading and the only growing mobile internet company, so we're in a great spot.
That was T-Mobile COO Mike Sievert. Well, Apple's appetite for deals grows. The tech giant investing nearly $400 million in Finisar, a maker of laser technology that is critical for new iPhone X features like facial recognition. This coming just days after Apple confirmed it bought music app Shazam for an undisclosed amount. We got all the details with Bloomberg Tech reporter Mark Gurman.
So this deal is part of Apple's billion-dollar pledged fund to invest in manufacturing in America. Obviously, this has come on the heels of President Trump and his proclamations about everything needing to be manufactured in the U.S. So they're investing $390 million in a Texas-based company called Finisar. They make lasers that they can put in a bunch of different products, from the AirPods, the little black circles you see inside the AirPods. Those are lasers shooting into your ears so they know if they're in your ears. So when you take them out of your ears, they stop playing, you put them back, they continue playing. It's a laser used for Face ID, so it can recognize your face. So it's an extremely important component for Apple's latest, string of products.
And it's currently in the iPhone X?
They're currently using sensors like Finisar makes in the iPhone X. Now they're going to be investing in it. They're sort of going to put a chokehold on that market of sensors so they can use them in other products down the road.
So how many jobs are they creating here?
Lots of jobs. What's happening here is with the $390 million, Finisar is going to be able to reopen a plant in Texas that had previously shut down. Now they're going to be able to rehire a bunch of people to work at that facility.
Will this alleviate any supply chain challenges?
That's a good question. In a sense, yes, because that amount of money, the $390 million, is going to ensure that that amount of money is invested in those components that Apple will need. They're going to be able to work years ahead on them.
So right now, this tech is being used in the Animoji technology as well. Explain that.
So the technology, the lasers, is based in Face ID, and that replicates with Animoji. So if you have an iPhone X, it could scan your face, it knows it's you. Then the sensor, the lasers, could also be used for Animoji, so it knows your facial structure, if you're opening your mouth, if you're smiling, if you're shaking your head. But like I said, it's also used for the AirPods as well. So there's broad applications for the tech.
Gene Munster is saying that the deal gives Apple a competitive advantage when it comes to AR. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Apple has actually been ahead of the pack in terms of AR. They are one of the first companies to recognize the importance of AR over VR for smartphones and glasses and such. And so what you're seeing here is Apple really investing even more deeply in this technology, more than you've seen other companies like Samsung or Google do in recent history.
We reported earlier this week, you reported on Apple buying Shazam. How does this new news give us more insight into their M&A strategy? I mean, are they on a spree?
So you see, actually, that's a good question, because you see two different paths happening right now. You're seeing Apple doing more investments, technological investments, in order to prepare for its future, but also, big-time acquisitions, such as what we saw with Shazam. Shazam, they bought the whole company, the technology, the people, and the resources. They're going to integrate it in the company. So that's one arm of the M&A strategy. The other arm are these big investments, not full-on acquisitions, but giving companies money in order for them to have enough resources to build components that Apple needs down the road.
So you think we'll see more of this?
I think we'll definitely see more on both paths.
That was Bloomberg's Mark Gurman. Coming up, the Winklevoss twins may have missed out on becoming Facebook billionaires, but now Bitcoin has them joining the club. That is next. And a reminder, all episodes of Bloomberg Technology are live streaming on Twitter. You can check us out at Technology, weekdays, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to the best of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Bitcoin's massive rally is helping lift up some of its overshadowed competitors. Ethereum and Litecoin, the second and fourth largest cryptocurrencies this week, surged to all-time highs. This on optimism that Bitcoin futures will attract institutions to the fledgling market. Two people riding high on the Bitcoin wave are Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss, co-founders of the Bitcoin cryptocurrency exchange Gemini, thought to be among the biggest holders of Bitcoin. They spoke to Bloomberg about why they made such a big bet on an uncertain asset.
Well, we think that Bitcoin is like gold 2.0. So whatever the reasons, your reasons for investing in gold, whether it's scarce, durability, portability, fungibility, we think that Bitcoin matches or beats gold across the board in all of those categories. It's actually not scarce, it's fixed. You can send it around like you send an email. It's a lot harder to do that with bars of gold. So the market cap right now of Bitcoin is 300 billion. The market cap of gold is 6 trillion. We think that Bitcoin disrupts gold. We've been saying this since the market cap was 1 billion in Bitcoin. We're 300 times more correct today, and we think that there's a chance we'll be 20 times more correct from here on out.
Is there any reason to believe that in fact people are selling gold and buying Bitcoin?
We're not. That's very possible for sure. I think anybody who likes the characteristics of gold in their portfolio definitely will be attracted to gold. I mean Bitcoin, excuse me.
I love that you mentioned that because Jeff Curry actually had a note out talking about that. And from his research, on the flip side, that he hasn't seen that yet because ETF flows haven't seen outflows of gold per se, and they look at a different kind of supply and demand dynamic, Julie, than what Bitcoin will be.
So you said you could be 20 times more correct than you are now, right? In other words, that we could see another 20 or even 30-fold, I think you guys were quoted as saying, increase in the price of Bitcoin. But sort of how do you get there? Because even people who are positive on Bitcoin, many of them say we could see a sharp correction. Then it might go back up. But, it could be a rocky road to get there.
I think part of that is creating access to it. So we built Gemini.com, which is a licensed exchange and custodian. We're a New York trust company. We've launched 2 years ago. We're onshore, headquartered in New York. So it makes it easier for hedge funds to get involved. We have some of the world's most sophisticated market makers and prop trading firms already on Gemini. Sort of phase 2 of that is creating a futures contract, which we've done with the SIBO, a Bitcoin futures contract that's cash settled, which allows institutions that are already trading up in Chicago exchanges to get exposure to Bitcoin with cash and that settle out in cash. So they don't actually have to touch or feel Bitcoin, and they get the exposure to it. And I think the next phase to that would be something like an ETP ETF product.
Which you guys had introduced. You had a filing in with the SEC. The SEC pushed it back to you like it has with all of the ETF filings. Are you planning to refile? What's the next step in the process?
So we're actually, we're in process. We don't have to refile because we're on appeal. So the disapproval ruling is appealed right now. And we're just waiting to be heard by the commissioners.
So what's the next step with the CME? Because we have the SIBO up now and running. CME is right around the corner. It will be based differently, as I understand it. The price will be taken not from Gemini, which is what you co-founded, but actually from a combination of different exchanges.
That's right. Our contract settles to the Gemini auction. We really love our product because we think it's simple and very easy to understand and arbitrage between the futures price and the underlying spot. The CME product, we certainly welcome them to the party. Theirs settles on a blended index, so it's a different flavor, but we welcome more products and more price discovery in this market.
When the contracts were being launched, one of the issues was that daily auction volumes can be really light on Gemini, and that you don't always wind up producing a price, and that can actually be really difficult then for the exchange. What have you done to address something like that?
So auction mechanisms are very tried and true. They're used around the world to price assets in all kinds of markets like equities. So we think, the mechanism that we've chosen is very straightforward and simple, and it will naturally, organically grow as this contract grows. So we're not really concerned. And, we run auctions every day, even holidays and through the weekends. So those might be a little more thinly traded, but on weekdays, that's really where you want to focus on, where the contracts are going to settle. It's the largest global liquidity event in the entire Bitcoin market. It may be small.
It's like 1.3 million average daily volume.
But at that largest time, that's the key. If you look at 4 o'clock and you look at the constituents of another blended index, and you look at 4 o'clock in time, $1 to $3 million print is actually quite large. It's very elevated liquidity and increased price discovery. And a lot of these auctions are also self-fulfilling. All of a sudden, you have a contract pricing to it, so it builds the reason for it or the relevancy of it. So it's sort of like unfair to sort of take a snapshot in time before there's actually something tied to that price.
Of course, you guys are just one exchange, as we've been talking about, and many times you see pretty divergent prices on these different exchanges, which can make it more difficult to trade Bitcoin. It can certainly make it more difficult to transact in Bitcoin. What do you think causes more price stability, and does Bitcoin need to be transactional at some point more than it is right now?
So it depends on which exchanges you're talking about. Not all exchanges are created equal. We're a New York Trust Company. We are the most regulated Bitcoin exchange and custodian in the world. When you look at the prices across U.S. exchanges that are actually regulated, it's a very small deviation. They actually very much track each other. If you're talking about unregulated offshore exchanges in different jurisdictions that are highly risky, of course there's going to be risk premiums. Sometimes people can't get their fiat currency in and out.
Well, but we're talking about Coinbase too, right? I mean, Coinbase is U.S. based, and its price has been quite different at times from some of the other exchanges.
I think it's all about getting more sophisticated players into the ecosystem. The Bitcoin futures product that we have been building and that is live right now, the first ever Bitcoin futures product with the SIBO, will create for the first time an easy way to short Bitcoin. And so there will be a two-sided market, which will reduce volatility in the long run, increase price discovery, and increase liquidity.
That was Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss there, co-founders of Gemini. So who else is riding high on the cryptocurrency spike? Tom Metcalf covers billionaires and wealth for Bloomberg and joins us now. So Tom, first I want to start off with the Winklevoss twins. How did they amass such a stake, and how big is it?
Well, you can actually trace it almost back to Facebook, because obviously they had that famous dispute with Mark Zuckerberg, and out of that they got about $20 million of cash and then $45 million at the time in Facebook stock. And they've used that to kind of go into all sorts of various investments, and one of them was in 2013 they bought $11 million worth of Bitcoin, and we've been tracking the price of that, and in December that $11 million was based on our calculations worth about $1 billion, and now after the last week of absolute crazy Bitcoin pricing, it's risen to 1.7 billion, which has effectively made them both billionaires, as long as you think they can liquidate that Bitcoin holding.
Now, is it true that the vast majority of Bitcoin wealth is held by a very small number of people?
Yeah, there's some really interesting reporting out of Bloomberg this week which suggests there's only about, dozens of basically whales who own effectively 40% of the currency. And that, for me, as a wealth reporter, is probably the most sort of interesting point or point of contention here, is if someone really wants to sell out, say, of a big $100 million Bitcoin holding, how's that going to affect the market? If there's a limited number of big players, any of their sales will really influence it, especially when you're seeing sort of, at least in terms of other sort of equity markets, much more limited volume and trading.
And do those whales, so to speak, hold an oversized amount of influence in this uncertain and rapidly developing new market?
Oh yeah, definitely, and I think you can see that in these big fluctuations. It's very hard to call. No one really knows when they're coming, and to be honest, no one really knows why and how. But when you've seen a few of the big sales come through, boom, the price has taken a massive hit. And similarly, what's driving the current price uprise? Yes, there's plenty of, say, retail investors coming in, but it's the big boys out there, I'm sure, who are causing most of the movements.
You've also been tracking a little-known business called Crypto Company that's been on an even wilder ride than Bitcoin. Explain.
Yeah, so it's basically the first publicly traded company which says it will invest in Bitcoin. It's called Crypto Company, and if you've been watching its market cap, it's been incredible. When I first took a look at it, it was sort of in the hundreds of millions, and then this week it suddenly ballooned to 12 billion, and then today it's fallen about 65%. It's at 4.5 billion, and basically it's a stock that's traded over the counter. So these numbers shouldn't necessarily, they're not sort of as authentic even as a Bitcoin price. But what that means is on paper, the founders who set this up in June or something like that have built a $1 billion stock position, but only on paper really. It's an over-the-counter stock, so this volatility is sort of based on very, very thin volumes of, $1 million or $2.
There's also an interesting story out on the Bloomberg terminal about the involvement of women in the cryptocurrency market, which was initially, as most things are, dominated by men. But the subhead of this story is that Bitcoin is very welcoming to anyone who drinks the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, exactly. It's really, it's the whole nature of it. It's a totally open opportunity, and as anyone has a chance to perhaps change the future of finance.
That was Bloomberg's Tom Metcalf. Coming up, California Governor Jerry Brown explains why the state is leading the charge on climate change and how Silicon Valley is joining the effort. Plus, goodbye Ireland. Under pressure from tax authorities, Facebook declares it will no longer funnel taxes through its Irish subsidiary. This is Bloomberg. This week, French President Emmanuel Macron hosted the One Planet Summit in Paris, where political and business leaders came together to review progress toward the goals set out in the COP21 agreements. California Governor Jerry Brown was among the attendees. Bloomberg's David Weston caught up with him and asked about California's role in combating global warming. Take a listen.
We're not going to convert Donald Trump. We're not going to convert Mitch McConnell or the Koch brothers or Mr. Ryan. They're in a cabal of denial, destructive of science. They're pulling back on research. They're trying to prevent California and other places that want to go on a renewable pathway, and they want to resurrect coal, which is dying. So that's all true. But a convocation such as this does mobilize commitment that doesn't exist before they come here. There are real financial statements that are going to be reflective of real commitments of dollars. Here, I heard just 3 this morning for West Africa, for Indonesia, and for other countries that are named. So these are real things. We're doing stuff, and we are converting people. But we've got to do it one company, one state, one nation at a time. So, yes, this isn't perfect. Yes, there are a lot of people here talking and what have you. But, damn it, the world is going in the wrong direction. It's going to hell, not to heaven. And we've got to wake people up. And just because the cynical complacency of the powerful obscures the truth, there's no reason why people such as the Secretary General of the UN, the President of France, and many others from Denmark, from Sweden, from Romania, from so many other countries, the Vice Premier of China. So there are a lot of people, and there are more all the time. There's more than there was 2 years ago. So, look, it's a real battle. It's not clear we're going to win it, but I'm going to do everything that I can while I have any position of power and responsibility to move the world toward a future that is sustainable and will not be the destructive path that the cynics and those who don't understand climate science are rather stupidly moving the world toward. So, yeah, we're making progress. Is it enough? No. Is the world on the right track yet? No. But we're taking steps, and next September in San Francisco we'll have a similar conference, and we'll keep doing as long as we can, and eventually I believe we're going to win. The people who are on the side of truth, sustainability, and the science as we now all understand it.
And finally, Governor, I have to ask you about Edwin Lee. We just received word a few hours ago that Edwin Lee, the mayor of San Francisco, passed away in an untimely way. I don't know any of the details, but give us your thoughts about Edwin Lee.
Look, Ed Lee was a really good guy. I knew him. I didn't know him for a long time. But he was really a politician that I think spoke the language of the people. He was down to earth. He was real, genuine, had integrity, working hard in a very difficult city that is very divided along many different lines. So he'll be missed. He was a good guy. He represented California in the city, and untimely. You know, these things happen. We all never know the time nor the hour when our time comes up. and I would just say we're going to miss Ed Lee quite a lot.
That was Governor Jerry Brown of California speaking with Bloomberg's David Weston. And as David and the governor were just discussing, San Francisco Mayor Ed Lee has died. Lee had a close working relationship with the tech industry in the city since taking office in 2011, working to lure startups and keep major tech firms in San Francisco through various proposals involving taxes and housing. He also trumpeted San Francisco as a sanctuary city for undocumented immigrants and opposed President Trump's executive order aimed at stripping such cities of federal funding. Mayor Lee was 65 years old. He was a guest on our show several times, and he will be missed. Facebook is changing its tax structure. The social network will start to pay taxes in the countries where sales are made, rather than funneling everything through its Irish subsidiary. You'll recall Facebook has come under pressure from the U.S. and Europe for its tax practices, specifically routing UK-based sales through Ireland. And here in the States, it's currently locked in a battle with the Internal Revenue Service that may cost it more than $5 billion, plus interest and penalties related to its Irish operations. Bloomberg's Sarah Fryer joined us with more.
You know, these companies exist on the internet, right? And so they've been able to be very creative about where they decide to book that revenue. Now, most of the self-service advertising revenue is still going to be routed through Ireland, but beyond that, this is a big win for the individual countries, for, you know, say Italy and Germany and France, places that will start to collect taxes from Facebook.
Now, give us some of the numbers, because in many cases, the actual tax rate that Facebook has made, you know, in one case they paid $6,000 in taxes in a year, is infuriating.
It does seem infuriating, but Facebook's not alone in this. You have Facebook, Google, Apple, all these companies trying the best that they can to manage their tax issues. Of course, there's talk of repatriation of cash to the United States. It's only going to get a little harder for them. That said, in terms of numbers, this move doesn't necessarily mean that Facebook's overall taxes will go up.
Interesting. Why not?
Because it could end up being about the same rate for them. It's just going to be very complicated to implement. And in the FT report today that broke the news, they said that it might not actually be fully operational until the end of 2019. So this change is a long ways away, and Facebook is just letting us know now.
What do you make of the timing of this? Obviously, Facebook is under pressure for fake news and many, many other things in this moment in time.
This is a very critical moment for the company, where they have to make sure that they're on the good side of the governments that they're working with. I mean, in some of these jurisdictions, there are elections where they've come under pressure for the way information is spread on their platform. They've been asked to tackle ISIS accounts that are spreading in Europe. The company is working with governments and regulators on those issues and also these. Also, they were not going to be able to use the same tactics in Ireland for much longer.
Now, you also have an excellent story out about fake news, how that gets propagated, where you actually interview someone who has created very partisan and inflammatory news, you know, and you talk about how Facebook is fighting that battle on that front. Meantime, Selena Wang, who covers Twitter now for us, here to talk about an interesting piece in BuzzFeed about how Steve Bannon and Breitbart tried to exploit and manipulate the weaknesses in Twitter's policies. All of this does somewhat tie together. Selena, I'll start with you. You know, what was the gist of this article, and how did Bannon and Breitbart manipulate, to a certain extent, Twitter?
So the real crux of that story was that Bannon and Breitbart were trying to seek retribution to Twitter, that they were upset. It seemed like the platform was silencing conservative voices, especially the writers of Breitbart. So Bannon went on this hunt for legal and financial and editorial ways to really damage Twitter's reputation and devalue them. They wanted to find out ways to sue them, to get short sellers really galvanized about this company. And I think at the pinpoint of this really just shows that philosophical conundrum Twitter's been since its very conception, is how do they maintain this open platform while not allowing abuse and harassment to run rampant on its site?
Well, and to a certain extent, they succeeded, right?
Well, no matter what they do, there's always going to be people seeking intense backlash against them. From the very beginning, they wanted to be the free speech wing of the free speech party. They don't want to be the arbiter of what's appropriate information, and neither does Facebook, because that puts them in very murky territory. They just want to be an open town hall for people to say whatever they want to say, whether that's good or bad, and they are hands off.
Which, Sarah, as you know, has in a way been the bane of their existence.
Right. So the man I profiled basically saw this call as a call to action. The fact that Facebook was neutral, they would allow content that was just viral. And how do you make the best viral content? Well, it's outrageous. it's something that's going to spark emotion. It's partisan. He was building a website that went even further than Fox News in terms of conservative leanings and often veered into fake news. And from what we were talking about with Twitter, I mean, Facebook's had to make the same decisions. How much of this content do we limit? What ways do we limit it? Do we absolutely ban it? Or do we just remove ranking in the newsfeed algorithm, which is similar to Twitter's removal of a verification check mark, like these half measures that companies have done. So basically this year, his very popular conservative website does get crushed by Facebook's fake news efforts in their change of the algorithm ranking. So it's just not profitable to run anymore.
He can produce the same thing, but it's not going to be viral. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And
will it be allowed on Facebook?
It will still be allowed. I mean, the thing with Facebook is they are trying to dampen this stuff from going viral, but they don't want to be the arbiter of truth, just like Twitter doesn't want to be the arbiter of truth. And they don't want to explicitly say this can't go on our platform. That brings up free speech concerns, even though Facebook and Twitter are not governmental bodies. They understand their power over global conversation. They don't want to be seen as censoring any one ideology. They don't want to appear biased.
Which brings us to the controversy we've talked about again and again about the president being on Twitter and using it to, what many people believe, inflame, harass. And many people have questioned whether Twitter should allow him on the platform at all.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Not only their users, but actually I've spoken to a member of their own Trust and Safety Council who thinks it's not right that Trump is on the platform because the cyberbullying, some of the inciting violence, if it were a regular user tweeting a lot of that stuff, the belief is that Twitter would kick them off. However, Twitter does try to weigh the newsworthiness of tweets of a user and weigh that against the disparagement, the content of the actual tweets. And in the case of Donald Trump, we've heard from the executive chairman, we've heard from Noto that they like that Trump is using this platform. They like that global leaders are turning to Twitter as their first mode of communication because, I mean, that's good for Twitter's user numbers, it's good for engagement, it's good for keeping them in the news overall awareness for their brand and keeping Twitter in the overall zeitgeist. And so they're willing to put that over these concerns of users that Trump is not a healthy addition to Twitter.
Meantime, really fascinating comments from a former Facebook executive, now a venture capitalist who we've interviewed many times on this show, Chamath Palihapitiya, speaking at a conference at Stanford Business School last month. He said, "I feel tremendous guilt. It literally is at a point now where we have created tools that are ripping apart the social fabric of how society works." He never said Facebook by name, but many people believe he was quite clearly talking about Facebook. Facebook has now come out and really hit back on Chamath's comments in a very unusual move to, talk about a specific person's comment. Sarah, what do you make of this whole situation?
The company usually stays silent in these circumstances. What Chamath said must have really angered someone at the top. I mean, he is basically using this moment to cement how he wants people to think about him and his contribution to this legacy. He was big on the Facebook growth team back in the day. And so this is a moment for him to come out and speak, and within Facebook, they're probably worried that he's using it a little opportunistically.
Now, for something out of this world, astronauts on the International Space Station normally have to wait to see movies out in theaters on Earth. But they're getting one notable exception. Disney has arranged a special screening of Star Wars: The Last Jedi aboard the space station at the same time it premieres in theaters. And that does it for this edition of the Best of Bloomberg Technology. We will bring you all the latest in tech throughout the week. You can tune in each day, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. And remember, all episodes of Bloomberg Technology are now live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology weekdays. That's all for now. This is Bloomberg.